He thought love was disposable. A millionaire CEO cast aside his Jamaican wife for the woman who cleaned their floors. But 5 years later, when she returned, the truth she carried would shatter his entire world. If this story resonated with you, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow, I will be giving you another story just as beautiful as this one, and you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. The sun hung low over the city skyline, pouring golden light across the glass towers where power and money lived. Inside one of those towers, on the top floor, sat Adrian Cole, a man who had clawed his way from nothing into becoming one of the youngest millionaire CEOs in the state. People admired his sharpness, feared his temper, and whispered about his reckless hunger for more. Yet for all his success, there was one thing Adrian never seemed to master: his heart. At the beginning of his empire's rise, he had married Amara, a Jamaican woman with laughter like music and eyes that carried oceans of patience. She had been the anchor to his storm, the reminder that money meant little without love. Amara was not a woman of wealth or privilege. She was a woman of culture, strength, and humility. But as Adrian's fortune grew, so did his pride. Soon, the man Amara once knew began to fade into someone else entirely. Someone cold, untouchable, and dangerously blind to what truly mattered. In the Cole mansion, far removed from the boardrooms and flashing cameras, another figure moved quietly through the halls: Elena, the maid. She was younger, cunning, and knew how to flatter Adrian in ways that stoked his ego. Amara treated her with kindness, but Elena's eyes always lingered where they should not, watching the tension in the marriage, waiting for cracks to widen. Friends had warned Amara. They told her that success changes a man, that money makes him forget the soil he grew from, but she had held on with faith. She still believed in her vows, still believed in the man she had chosen, even as he spent more time at the office and less time looking at her. One evening, Adrian came home late. The air between him and Amara was heavy, silence louder than words. She tried to reach him with gentle questions about his day, about the board, about his stress, but he brushed her off. Then came the subtle looks between him and Elena, the maid who had somehow grown bolder in the house. That was when Amara's heart began to tremble with the fear that her marriage, her home, and her life as she knew it were slipping away. She had no idea that the betrayal she feared was closer than she imagined, and that the decision Adrian was about to make would not just destroy their love, but leave scars that would echo 5 years into the future. The storm came on an ordinary night. Rain drummed against the tall windows of the Cole mansion while Amara prepared dinner, her hands moving rhythmically as she seasoned the stew with the spices of home. The air filled with thyme, garlic, and Scotch bonnet, the kind of meal she made whenever she wanted to remind Adrian of the roots he was drifting away from. But Adrian didn't sit at the table that night. He stood instead, his suit still on, his tie loosened, his jaw tight with an unspoken weight. Amara, sensing his mood, smiled gently and said, "Come sit. Eat with me. It has been so long since we shared a meal like this." He didn't move. His eyes darted past her, toward the hallway, where Elena appeared with a tray of wine glasses. The moment stretched, heavy and strange, before Adrian finally said words that shattered the silence. "Amara, I cannot do this anymore." Her hand stilled. The wooden spoon slipped from her fingers and clattered into the pot. She turned slowly, searching his face, hoping she had misheard. "What do you mean, Adrian?" He exhaled, as though freeing himself from chains. "You and I, we are too different. I need someone who understands the world I live in now, someone who can keep up with me." "Elena," his voice broke, then hardened. "She makes me feel alive again." The room spun. For a moment, Amara thought it was a cruel joke, some kind of test. But when Elena lowered her eyes, feigning shame while hiding a smirk, Amara knew the truth. Her knees weakened. She clutched the counter, her chest rising and falling like a tide about to drown. "You would throw away everything? For her? For the maid I trusted in my own home?" Adrian's gaze didn't falter. Pride gleamed in his eyes, drowning out whatever love once lived there. "This is not a discussion. I want a divorce." The words sliced through her soul. In that moment, Amara's world collapsed. Not just her marriage, but her faith in the man she had once believed was hers forever. The dinner she had lovingly prepared burned on the stove, the spices filling the air with a bitter irony she would never forget. And in the corner, Elena stood, victorious in silence, as the woman of the house broke into pieces before her. The news of Adrian's decision spread through the mansion like fire through dry grass. The staff whispered in corners, their loyalty torn between the woman who had always treated them with kindness and the man whose wealth held their futures in his hands. Amara moved like a ghost through her own home that night, numb, her heart refusing to believe that her husband had chosen another woman. And worse, a woman she had sheltered, paid, and welcomed into her household. Every photograph on the walls, every memory stored in the rooms, now felt poisoned. She stood in their bedroom, staring at the bed they once shared, the sheets untouched for weeks. Her hands shook as she folded her clothes into a suitcase. Pride demanded she leave before he could force her out. Tears blurred her vision, but her back stayed straight. If he had abandoned her for Elena, then he would watch her walk away with dignity. Downstairs, Adrian poured himself a drink, the clink of ice in the glass cutting through the silence. Yet beneath the confidence he showed, a flicker of doubt haunted him. Amara's silence was louder than any argument, her quiet grace piercing deeper than if she had screamed. But pride refused to let him turn back. Elena, meanwhile, floated through the house as though she already belonged. She set her hand on Adrian's shoulder with a false gentleness, whispering, "You made the right choice. She was holding you back. I'll give you everything she couldn't." But in her heart, Elena's hunger was not love, it was ambition. She saw the mansion, the power, the money, and she wanted it all. Adrian was her stepping stone, and Amara was simply an obstacle cleared away. By dawn, Amara was gone. She left behind the golden life, the wealth, and the man she had loved, carrying only a single suitcase and a heart cracked wide open. Yet as the driver pulled away from the mansion gates, she placed a hand on her stomach, and a quiet thought slipped through the storm of her grief. She had not left alone. Something within her, a seed of life, was already growing. And that secret, unspoken in the stillness of the car, would be the force that changed everything 5 years later. The days that followed were a blur of silence and bitterness. Adrian's decision became official, signed on papers that arrived like death warrants. Lawyers shuffled documents, and the marriage that once seemed unbreakable was reduced to legal language and signatures. Amara resisted the collapse with every ounce of her being. At night, alone in the small apartment she rented after leaving the mansion, she clutched her belly and whispered to herself, "I will not break. I will not let him destroy me." She tried to drown her sorrow in prayer, in memories of the island songs her mother used to hum, but the betrayal pressed against her chest like a stone. Friends urged her to fight back, to expose Adrian, to shame him for choosing the maid over his own wife. But Amara shook her head. "I will not waste my life chasing revenge. My soul needs healing, not more poison." Still, beneath her words lay the flicker of doubt. Had she been too forgiving, too blind to the signs? Meanwhile, Adrian resisted his own truth. Though Elena wrapped herself around his life with eager arms, there were moments when her laughter felt hollow, when her touch lacked the warmth he remembered in Amara. Pride chained him, making him double down on his choice. He silenced the whispers in his heart by working later nights, chasing more deals, convincing himself he had traded up. Elena, however, fought another battle entirely. Though she had won Adrian's attention, she quickly discovered that stepping into Amara's place was no easy task. The staff despised her, the boardroom wives sneered at her, and Adrian's family, who had adored Amara, barely tolerated her presence. Resistance surrounded her on all sides, and in her darkest moments, she feared that Adrian's love might not be enough to shield her from the storm of disapproval. And so, all three found themselves locked in battles they could not admit aloud. Amara resisting despair, Adrian resisting regret, Elena resisting rejection. But none of them could have imagined that Amara's silent choice to walk away, carrying more than her pain, would become the most powerful resistance of all. 5 years slipped by like pages torn from a book. Adrian's empire expanded across cities, his name appearing in magazines and business journals as one of the youngest self-made millionaires of his generation. He wore tailored suits, attended glittering galas with Elena at his side, and smiled for cameras as though nothing in his life had ever gone wrong. But beneath the polished surface, cracks spread slowly. Elena had become restless. The thrill of conquest faded, and whispers of her spending habits, her indulgences, and her lack of grace began to circle in the same circles that once celebrated Amara's quiet dignity. The board members tolerated her, but never respected her, and Adrian's family had grown cold toward her presence. What she had chased, she realized, was not a life of love but a throne she could never sit on comfortably. Amara, on the other hand, had rebuilt herself far from the glittering city. She raised her son, Josiah, in a quieter neighborhood, teaching him the values of honesty, strength, and humility. She worked tirelessly to provide for him, her hands always busy, her spirit always anchored in faith. People in her community admired her resilience, never knowing the pain she carried from her past. Her son's laughter became her light, and every time he asked about his father, she carefully told him, "One day, you will know the truth." Fate, however, has a cruel way of weaving paths together. One summer evening, Adrian was invited to deliver a keynote speech at a charity gala supporting underprivileged youth programs. It was the kind of event he rarely refused, for it bolstered his public image. He prepared his speech with the usual polish, expecting another evening of applause and fine wine. But when he walked into the grand hall, the air thick with music and chatter, his eyes fell upon a figure across the room. A woman in a simple dress, her hair pinned back, her presence commanding without effort. Amara. For a moment, the world stopped. Adrian's chest tightened as memories he had buried came rushing back. The scent of her cooking, the sound of her laughter, the night he cast her aside. All of it collided with the sight of her standing tall, radiant as ever, even after years apart. And beside her, holding her hand, was a boy with eyes that mirrored his own. Adrian's steps faltered. Elena, noticing his distraction, tightened her grip on his arm, but it was too late. Fate had forced them into the same room once again, and the secret Amara carried was no longer hidden. The gala's music swelled, but to Adrian it was only noise. His gaze was locked on the boy at Amara's side, his son, though no one had spoken the truth aloud yet. The child had his jawline, his stride, even the same flicker of determination in his eyes. Adrian felt his chest tighten with recognition, a truth he couldn't escape no matter how hard he tried. Elena noticed too. Her smile froze, her nails digging into Adrian's arm, as if she could anchor him away from the storm about to come. "Who is she?" she hissed under her breath, though she already knew. The way Amara carried herself made every other woman in the room seem smaller, and Elena hated it. Across the hall, Amara felt Adrian's stare burning into her. She steadied her breath, whispering to Josiah, "Stay close to me, my love." The boy looked up curiously, unaware of the tension, unaware that the man across the room was his father. Amara's hands trembled as she smoothed his shirt, her mind racing. Should she leave before Adrian approached? Or was it time to face the truth she had shielded her son from for so long? Inevitably, Adrian crossed the floor. The crowd seemed to part for him, conversations falling into silence as his tall frame and commanding presence moved toward Amara. Elena trailed close behind, her smile stretched thin, masking the fury simmering in her veins. "Amara," Adrian said softly, almost reverently, as if the name itself had weight he had long forgotten. Her eyes flickered up to meet his, calm but guarded. "Adrian." Neither of them moved to embrace. The air between them pulsed with unspoken history, love, betrayal, abandonment. Adrian's eyes fell to Josiah, who clung to Amara's hand. The boy studied him curiously, tilting his head. "Mama, who is this man?" The question cracked the fragile composure around them. Gasps rippled through the nearby guests. Elena stiffened, her chest rising and falling as if the room had grown too small. Adrian's throat went dry. He wanted to speak, to claim his son, but the weight of his past sins chained him in silence. Amara bent down, meeting her son's eyes. Her voice was steady, though her heart pounded. "This is someone I once knew. Someone who made choices that changed our lives." Adrian flinched at her words, but before he could respond, Elena stepped forward, her voice sharp and dripping with false sweetness. "She should have told you. A real woman doesn't hide things like this. Clearly, she wanted to trap you, Adrian." The venom in her words drew stares from the crowd. Adrian turned sharply, his voice low but dangerous. "Enough, Elena." But But the damage was done. The room hummed with whispers, eyes darting between the millionaire CEO, his ex-wife, the maid-turned-partner, and the boy who looked too much like him to deny. For the first time in 5 years, Adrian felt the walls of his empire tremble, not from business rivals, not from financial collapse, but from the return of a woman and a child he could not erase. The gala ended in whispers. Cameras clicked, reporters sniffed the air for scandal, and Adrian left earlier than planned, his mind a storm he could not control. That night, he sat in his study, the amber glow of the lamp casting shadows across his face. Elena paced the room like a caged animal, her jealousy sharpening into rage. "You cannot let her humiliate us like that," she spat, parading a child around as if. Adrian slammed his glass down, cutting her words short. "That child is mine." Silence filled the room. Elena's lips parted, but no words came. For the first time, she saw the truth in Adrian's eyes. He wasn't guessing. He knew. Deep down, he had always known. Meanwhile, across the city, Amara sat at the edge of her modest bed, Josiah asleep beside her. She stroked his curls gently, her mind replaying the night. She had hoped she could slip in and out of the gala unnoticed, that Adrian would never know of the boy's existence. But fate had other plans. The memory of that night 5 years ago rose unbidden, her leaving the mansion with nothing but a suitcase, her body trembling as the truth of her pregnancy pressed against her. She had been tempted to tell Adrian, to reach out and force him to face what he had done. But her pride and her wounded heart refused. Why should she beg the man who abandoned her for the maid to be a father? Her decision had been born of pain, but also protection. She wanted her child raised in love, not in the shadows of betrayal. So she had chosen silence, raising Josiah alone, carrying both the joy of motherhood and the weight of secrecy. Now, that choice was unraveling. Josiah had questions. His sharp little eyes noticed things. "Mama," he asked one night, weeks before the gala, "why don't I have a father like the other kids at school?" Amara had kissed his forehead and said, "Because not every father is worthy of the gift of a child. But you, my son, you were always worthy of love." She told herself it was enough. Until tonight. Until Adrian's eyes locked on Josiah's, and every secret she had buried trembled on the edge of being exposed. And as she sat in the darkness, Amara whispered a prayer for strength, knowing that the man who had once broken her heart was about to step back into her life, whether she welcomed him or not. The morning after the gala, Amara's doorbell rang. She froze, her heart pounding. She already knew who it was before she even opened the door. Adrian stood on her doorstep, no bodyguards, no chauffeur, no polished smile for the cameras. Just a man in a suit that looked out of place in her humble neighborhood. His eyes were tired, searching, desperate. "Amara," he said quietly. For a long moment, she considered slamming the door. But Josiah's curious voice called from behind her. "Mama, who is it?" She sighed, stepping aside reluctantly. "Come in." But this changes nothing. Inside, the air was thick with tension. Josiah climbed onto the couch, watching Adrian with wide eyes. Adrian hesitated, then knelt down in front of him, lowering himself in a way he never did for anyone. "What's your name?" Adrian asked, his voice unsteady. "Josiah," the boy replied. Adrian swallowed hard. "That's a strong name." He smiled faintly, though his eyes glistened. Amara crossed her arms, her tone sharp. "Do not play games with him, Adrian. He is not a prize to be claimed. He is my son. I raised him alone." Adrian looked up at her, guilt etched into every line of his face. "I didn't know. You never told me. You never asked," she shot back, her voice trembling with both anger and pain. "You made your choice. You walked away, and I refused to let my child grow up as an afterthought in the shadow of your pride." For once, Adrian had no defense. He looked back at Josiah, who was fiddling with a toy car, innocent of the storm swirling around him. Elena was the first complication. She stormed into Adrian's office one evening, her voice shrill, her eyes flashing. "You disappear for hours. Your meetings run late. And don't think I don't know where you go." She slapped a photo on his desk, one of him leaving Amara's modest apartment, a paparazzi shot already circulating through gossip columns. "Do you have any idea what this will do to us?" Adrian's jaw tightened. "To us? Or to you?" Her face flushed. "Everything we've built. Our image. Our life. It will all unravel. That boy will ruin everything. He is my son, Adrian snapped, his voice rising. The room went still. It was the first time he had spoken those words aloud, and they echoed like thunder. Elena's face twisted in disbelief and rage. Meanwhile, Amara faced her own storm. At Josiah's school, whispers followed her. Other parents eyed her with curiosity, some with judgment, as headlines began to suggest scandal. Millionaire CEO's secret family, the tabloid screamed, painting Amara as the hidden mistress rather than the abandoned wife. She shielded her son as best she could, but the cruel world was already reaching for him. At night, Josiah asked, "Mama, why are people talking about me at school? Did I do something wrong?" Amara's chest ached as she pulled him close. "No, my love. You are blameless. The world just likes to talk when they don't understand the truth." To make matters worse, Adrian's board of directors began to grumble. Investors questioned whether his personal scandal would affect the company's image. One senior partner warned him bluntly, "Clean this up, Cole. Family drama is bad for business." Adrian sat in his office late into the night, the weight of his empire on one shoulder and the fragile bond with his son on the other. For years, he had built walls of pride and ambition. Now, for the first time, he faced a choice that no contract or deal could settle. And all the while, Elena plotted. She had clawed her way into Adrian's world, and she would not let a child, or the woman he had abandoned, tear it away from her. It was late evening when Amara finally decided to open the box she had hidden for years. Inside were letters she had written but never sent, letters to Adrian during her pregnancy, each one filled with words she could never bring herself to deliver. She sat at the kitchen table, Josiah asleep in the next room, the lamplight soft against her weary face. She picked up one of the letters, the ink faded but still legible. "I don't know if you would even care, but I am carrying your child. I thought you should know, though I doubt you will ever understand what this means. I wanted to tell you in person, but you had already made your choice." Tears pricked her eyes as she remembered the loneliness of those months. How she had worked long hours despite her swelling belly. How she had hidden her pain from neighbors who asked too many questions. How she had delivered Josiah without a hand to hold. She had buried those memories deep, but the weight of them still pressed on her chest. When Adrian came to visit the next day, he found her sitting with the letters spread across the table. His eyes fell on them immediately. "What are these?" Amara didn't look up. "The truth I tried to tell you once. The truth I carried alone." Cautiously, he picked one up. His eyes scanned the words, and for the first time in years, Adrian's mask cracked completely. His hands trembled as he read her pain in her own handwriting. You wrote to me?" "I did," she said bitterly. "But I never sent them. Because I realized it didn't matter. You had already chosen Elena, and I would not humiliate myself by begging for your attention." Adrian sank into the chair opposite her, the letters shaking in his hands. "Amara, I would have." She cut him off sharply. "Don't lie to me. You wouldn't have. You didn't even look back when I left. You never wondered why I walked away with nothing but a suitcase. You never asked." Her words hit him like blows. He pressed his hands to his face, ashamed. For all his wealth, his empire, his power, he had failed in the simplest duty of all, to love and protect the woman he had promised forever. In the silence that followed, the clock ticking on the wall, Adrian finally whispered, "I don't deserve forgiveness. But I want to try for him. For Josiah." Amara's eyes softened briefly at the mention of her son, but the walls around her heart remained strong. "For him, yes. But do not mistake that for a second chance with me. That bridge burned long ago." Yet as Adrian looked at her across the table, the letters between them like ghosts of a past too heavy to bury, he knew this was only the beginning of truths yet to be revealed. The days that followed unfolded like the slow thaw of winter. Though the air between Amara and Adrian remained tense, Josiah had a way of softening the edges neither of them could resist. One Saturday morning, Adrian arrived at Amara's apartment to find Josiah waiting eagerly with a soccer ball under his arm. "Mama said you used to play," the boy said with a grin. Adrian chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. "I did, though it's been years." Minutes later, the three of them were at the park. Josiah darted across the grass, his laughter ringing out as Adrian chased after him. Amara stood at the sidelines at first, her arms crossed, her heart torn between wariness and a quiet ache of nostalgia. But soon Josiah called out, "Mama, come join us." Reluctantly, she stepped forward. The game turned chaotic, Adrian slipping in the grass, Josiah giggling uncontrollably, Amara scoring a playful goal that left them both stunned. For a moment, the weight of the past seemed to lift. The three of them laughed together, the sound carrying on the breeze like music. Later, they sat beneath a tree, Josiah munching on snacks while Adrian and Amara found themselves caught in a memory. "Do you remember," Adrian began hesitantly, "that little field near your mother's house in Jamaica, where we first played together?" Amara's lips curved into a faint smile despite herself. "You were terrible at it. My cousins teased you the whole afternoon." Adrian laughed softly, the sound tinged with regret. "I didn't care. I just wanted to be near you." The words hung in the air, heavy with old truths. Amara looked away, her heart betraying her by beating faster. She had promised herself she wouldn't let him in again, but the memory of who he once was, the man before pride poisoned him, still lived somewhere deep inside her. Josiah leaned against Adrian's arm, yawning. The boy's trust came so easily, unburdened by the past. Adrian gazed down at him, emotion tightening his throat. "He's incredible, Amara. You've raised him so well." Her eyes softened, pride glowing in them. "He is my greatest blessing." For the first time in years, silence between them was not hostile but gentle, almost comfortable. It was a fragile bond, delicate as glass, but it was real. And in that moment, though neither would admit it, the walls around their hearts began to show their first cracks. The fragile bond they were building shattered one evening when the past came crashing into the present. Adrian had just dropped Josiah off after an afternoon together when flashing lights appeared outside Amara's apartment. Reporters swarmed the street, cameras in hand, microphones thrust forward. Headlines had broken earlier that day. CEO Adrian Cole's secret family exposed. Wife or mistress? Neighbors peered from windows, children whispered on the sidewalks, and Amara stood frozen at her door as the world devoured her privacy. "Amara, is it true you hid a child from him?" one reporter shouted. "Did you trap the CEO with your son?" another accused. "Was the maid just a cover-up?" The words cut deeper than knives. Amara's face burned with humiliation, her hands trembling as Josiah pressed close to her side. His frightened eyes widened at the frenzy, and he clung to her dress. "Mama, what's happening?" Before she could answer, Adrian stepped in front of them, shielding them from the cameras. His voice was thunder. "That's enough. Back away." But the damage had already been done. The story was everywhere, on television, in newspapers, on social media. Amara's reputation was dragged through the mud, painted as a schemer, a liar, a woman who had hidden a millionaire's child for personal gain. Back at Adrian's penthouse, Elena watched the coverage with satisfaction. She had made one phone call, leaked one photograph, and the chaos had bloomed exactly as she intended. But her smile faded when Adrian appeared on screen, not denying the child, but standing in front of Amara protectively. That was not the man she thought she controlled. That night, Amara broke. She shut the blinds, held Josiah close, and sobbed silently. All the dignity she had fought to preserve for 5 years, gone in a single headline. The privacy she had cherished for her son, torn apart by flashing cameras. Just when the weight of shame threatened to crush her, a gentle knock sounded on Amara's door. She opened it cautiously, expecting yet another reporter. Instead, she found Sister Ruth, the elderly Jamaican woman who lived down the hall. Her head was wrapped in a colorful scarf, and her eyes shone with both wisdom and kindness. "Child," Sister Ruth said softly, pressing a warm hand over Amara's trembling fingers. "Let me in before the night air steals your peace." Amara hesitated, then stepped aside. Inside, Ruth moved with a quiet grace, setting down a basket of steaming food. The aroma of curried goat and fresh bread filled the room, chasing away the bitterness of the day. "You've carried this burden alone too long," Ruth said, sitting across from her. "Now the whole world thinks it knows your story. But hear me, your worth is not in their headlines." Amara's throat tightened. "They call me a liar, a schemer. My son, he's suffering for mistakes that were never his." Sister Ruth reached over, squeezing her hand firmly. "And yet look at him, bright, kind, strong. That boy is no mistake. He is a blessing. You raised him with love, and love always leaves a mark greater than gossip." Meanwhile, in his own turmoil, Adrian found himself face to face with an unexpected ally. Mr. Bennett, a senior partner on the board, called him late one night. "You're stumbling, Cole," Bennett said bluntly. "But don't forget why you built this empire. It wasn't for the stockholders or the headlines. It was to prove something to yourself. Now's the time to prove you're more than a man running from his mistakes." Adrian, startled by the older man's rare show of compassion, sat back in silence. Bennett's words cut through the fog of guilt, forcing him to consider what he still had the power to protect: Amara, Josiah, and perhaps the fragile thread of redemption still left between them. For the first time in weeks, both Amara and Adrian felt a flicker of light. It wasn't forgiveness yet, nor healing, but it was hope, delivered by hands that had reached into their brokenness at the exact moment they needed it most. The night was quiet, but neither Amara nor Adrian found peace in sleep. Instead, each sat alone with their thoughts, replaying the choices that had brought them to this moment. Amara sat by the window, the moonlight casting silver across her face. Her journal lay open on her lap, its pages filled with years of prayers, fears, and dreams she never voiced aloud. She picked up her pen, hesitated, then wrote, "I loved him once. I trusted him once. And he broke me. Yet here he is again, broken himself. Do I have the strength to forgive, or will forgiveness only cost me more?" Her tears blurred the ink, but she didn't wipe them away. For the first time, she admitted to herself that her anger was not the only thing keeping Adrian at a distance. It was fear of reopening a wound that had barely healed. Across town, Adrian paced the length of his office, his reflection in the tall glass windows looking like a stranger. He poured a drink, but left it untouched on the desk. His thoughts were heavier than any whiskey could dull. He thought of the night he left Amara, her tears glistening in the lamplight, her voice trembling as she begged him not to choose pride over love. He had walked away anyway, chasing an illusion of control, only to end up hollow. Now, standing at the edge of ruin, he asked himself a question he had avoided for years. What if my greatest success is not in what I've built, but in who I've broken? For the first time, Adrian faced the truth without excuses. His betrayal had not only cost him his marriage, but had scarred the child he didn't know existed. Josiah's quiet bravery cut him deeper than any headline. Both Amara and Adrian, separated by miles but bound by shared regret, sat in silence. And in that silence, a seed of clarity took root. Healing would not come from erasing the past, but by owning it. The following morning dawned heavy with tension, as though the world itself held its breath. Amara stood in front of the mirror, fastening the small silver locket she always wore. Inside was a picture of Josiah as a baby, taken on the day she vowed to raise him with love, no matter what storms came. She touched the locket now, drawing strength from it. She had promised herself to shield her son, but part of shielding him meant deciding whether to let Adrian remain in his life or shut the door completely. At the same time, Adrian sat in his car outside her apartment building. He had been there for nearly an hour, wrestling with himself. Every instinct told him to retreat, to leave before he did more harm. But another voice, quieter, steadier, urged him to face the wreckage he had created and do the one thing he had never managed before: put someone else above his pride. Finally, he stepped out of the car. His knock at her door was tentative, almost apologetic. When Amara opened it, her eyes widened, a flicker of old hurt flashing across her face. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice calm but guarded. Adrian swallowed hard. "I came to say I won't run anymore. Not from you. Not from Josiah. I don't know if I deserve a place in his life, or yours, but I want to try. Tell me what you need, Amara, and I'll do it." Her breath caught at the rawness in his voice. For a moment, she simply stared at him, torn between the bitterness that had preserved her all these years and the faint whisper of the love they once shared. "I don't need apologies, Adrian," she said finally. "I need proof. If you want to be in Josiah's life, you must show him with actions, not words. And if you fail him, there will be no second chances." Her tone was firm, but her eyes betrayed the tremor of vulnerability she could not hide. Adrian nodded slowly, as if accepting a verdict. "Then let me prove it. Not for me. For him." The silence that followed was heavy, charged with uncertainty. But it was also a beginning, the first fragile step toward something that might one day resemble healing. The first glimmer of change came not with grand gestures, but with small, steady acts. Adrian showed up at Josiah's school the next week, not in a chauffeur-driven car or a tailored suit, but quietly, with a backpack slung over one shoulder and a nervous smile on his face. Josiah's classmates watched curiously as Adrian knelt beside his son, helping him pack away his books. For the first time, Josiah didn't feel like the boy whispered about. He felt like a boy with a father who showed up. Amara, waiting at the gate, saw the moment. She watched Josiah's face light up, his laughter unguarded as Adrian ruffled his hair. Her heart twisted with something dangerous, something that felt too close to hope. Later that week, Adrian invited them both to the museum, a quiet place away from cameras. Josiah darted from exhibit to exhibit, wide-eyed with wonder, while Adrian and Amara trailed behind, speaking in cautious tones. "You were always better at slowing down to notice things," Adrian murmured as they paused in front of a painting. "I was always too busy trying to own the world." Amara's lips curved faintly, not quite a smile. "And look where that chasing got you." His laugh was low, self-deprecating. "Lost. Until now." Their eyes met for a heartbeat too long. Amara looked away, her pulse quickening. She hated how easily old emotions stirred, yet she couldn't deny the gentleness in his gaze. The man she once loved flickering back through the cracks of who he had become. That night, as they walked Josiah home, the boy slipped his hand into both of theirs, linking them together. Neither Amara nor Adrian pulled away. The warmth of his small palm bound them in silence, a fragile thread of unity neither dared name aloud. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a step. And for the first time in years, the future didn't feel like a closed door. It felt like a window slowly opening. Just when the fragile threads of hope began to weave between them, the storm returned with greater force. Elena had been watching from the shadows, her pride wounded, her grip on Adrian slipping. The headlines had begun to turn against her, questions rising about her role in leaking the scandal. Furious and desperate, she made her final move. One afternoon, Amara received an envelope slipped under her apartment door. Inside were glossy photographs, grainy but unmistakable. Adrian and Elena together, in a hotel lobby, laughing over drinks. The timestamp read only 3 weeks earlier, right before Adrian had reappeared in her life. Amara's hands shook as she flipped through the images. Her heart plummeted. Had he been playing her again? She thought of Josiah, of the trust she had dared to allow back in. Tears burned her eyes as she whispered, "Not again. God, not again." That evening, when Adrian arrived to take Josiah to the park, Amara met him at the door with the photos in her hand. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice trembling with both fury and heartbreak. Adrian froze, the color draining from his face. "Amara, it's not what it looks like." "Don't you dare," she cut him off sharply. "Don't you dare feed me the same lies you once did. I let you in, Adrian. For Josiah's sake, for my sake. And this is what you do." Josiah appeared from the hallway, his small voice breaking the tension. "Mama? Dad? What's wrong?" Amara swallowed hard, blinking back tears as she turned away. "Go back to your room, Josiah." The boy hesitated, confusion clouding his eyes, before obeying. Adrian stepped closer, desperation etched across his features. "Amara, listen to me. I met her that night. Yes, but only to tell her it was over. I swear on everything, I haven't touched her since. She staged this. She's trying to destroy us." But Amara's walls slammed back into place, fortified by the sting of betrayal. "I can't do this again, Adrian. I won't let Josiah be caught in the fire of your sins." She pushed the door shut, leaving Adrian standing in the hallway, his hand pressed against the wood, his heart breaking in silence. The fragile hope they had built now teetered on the edge of ruin. The days that followed were the darkest yet. Amara kept her distance, answering Adrian's calls with silence, her heart too raw to risk believing him. Josiah, sensing the tension, grew quiet again, his laughter fading as he asked questions she couldn't bear to answer. But Adrian refused to vanish this time. He hired investigators, determined to uncover the truth. Within a week, the proof surfaced, surveillance footage of Elena meeting a photographer, slipping him money, instructing him to doctor the timestamps. The so-called evidence had been nothing more than a trap. With the files in hand, Adrian went to Amara's apartment. She opened the door reluctantly, her face guarded. He handed her the folder without a word. Inside were the damning images of Elena's scheme, clear and undeniable. Amara's breath hitched as she scanned the evidence. Shame and regret twisted inside her. She looked up at Adrian, her voice breaking. Why didn't you just walk away? You could have left me to believe the worst. His eyes softened, raw with sincerity. Because I've done that before, Amara. I walked away when you needed me most, and it ruined everything. I won't do it again. Not with you. Not with him. Not ever. Her tears spilled freely now, her defenses cracking under the weight of his words. For the first time, she saw not the arrogant man who had abandoned her, but the man who was trying, faltering, stumbling, but fighting for them. Behind her, Josiah appeared, clutching his toy car. His small voice cut through the silence. Mama, can Dad stay for dinner? The question was so innocent, so pure, that it pierced Amara's heart. She looked at Adrian, then at her son, the living bond between them, and finally nodded, whispering, yes. That evening, they sat at the table together. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't healed. But as laughter slowly crept back into Josiah's voice, and as Amara caught herself smiling at Adrian's awkward attempts at humor, something shifted. Not forgiveness, not yet. But the breakthrough of truth had opened a door. And for the first time, Amara allowed herself to step through it. Weeks passed, and the noise of scandal slowly began to fade. The headlines moved on. The reporters found other stories to chase, and in the quiet that followed, healing began to take root. Adrian worked tirelessly to rebuild not just his public image, but his private one. He cut ties with Elena completely, stepping down from certain corporate duties to prove his priorities had shifted. To the shock of his board, he told them, family comes first. Without it, the rest means nothing. Amara watched from the sidelines, cautious but observant. Day by day, Adrian kept showing up. He walked Josiah to school. He helped with homework. He learned how to braid plantains with Amara in the kitchen, laughing at his clumsy attempts. Slowly, his actions began to speak louder than any promise he could make. One Sunday afternoon, they visited the same little park where Amara had once sat alone with Josiah, watching other families play. This time, Josiah ran ahead of them, his laughter ringing through the air as he chased his kite. Amara and Adrian sat on the bench, side by side, the silence between them no longer heavy but tender. You've changed, Amara said softly, her eyes on the sky. Adrian turned to her, his voice low but steady. No, I've finally become the man I should have been all along. She looked at him, her heart trembling. For years, she had built walls to protect herself, to shield her son. But now, sitting here, she realized the walls were no longer needed. Amara reached out, her hand brushing his. For a moment, neither moved. Then, slowly, she let her fingers slip into his, holding on. In the distance, Josiah's kite soared higher, catching the wind, rising against the fading sunlight. The family that had once been torn apart was finding its way back, not through perfection, but through persistence, truth, and the quiet courage to forgive. And for the first time in years, Amara whispered the words she once thought she would never say again. Welcome home. My beautiful families, in life, betrayal may wound deeply, but it also clears the path for strength, healing, and sometimes even redemption. True wealth isn't measured in money or status. It's found in loyalty, love, and the people who stand with us when everything else falls apart. If you were in her place, betrayed by the one you loved most, would you seek revenge, forgiveness, or simply walk away to build a new life?
Thank you so much for watching this story all the way to the end. If you enjoyed this one, then you'll absolutely love the next. It's even crazier and more captivating than you can imagine. So go ahead and click the video showing right here on your screen, and I'll see you in the next story.